Okay, match two. We've got a pretty good hand. I don't normally keep. I don't like keeping four land hands, but a cantrip into Brawl and Manamorphose is a pretty ideal start. When leading with fetches, you should almost always start with a Flooded Strand rather than a Scalding Tarn because it helps hide what you're playing a little bit, and the Scalding Tarn's a better fetch because you can get a basic island or a basic mountain, while Flooded Strand will also be used at the end of your turn to simply get a just to get a tapped Steam Vents. Okay, this is a relatively tough choice. The Pyretic Ritual lets us go off immediately if we draw something, but the Sleight of Hand kind of can get us into that Gifts Ungiven. I think we want the Pyretic Ritual more at this point. Because we have a couple draw steps, because we're going to cast Brawl next turn to draw into some sort of action. Okay. Looks like we're playing normal Tron. This is a pretty good matchup. Though, like every other deck, it's hard to beat Karn on turn 3. Our life total is not very important in this matchup, so we're going to probably just cast Flooded Strand and shock ourselves for a Steam Vent. It can be a tricky call about whether you're playing Tron or Eldrazi Tron, but the chromatic spheres and such are the eggs are a giveaway that it's Tron rather than Eldrazi Tron. If we were in fact playing against Eldrazi Tron, they do have Warping Whale, so sometimes it is superior to play Electromancer over Brawl because he doesn't die to the Warping Whale. A lot of time they just play Spatial Distortion for their removal, and that kills both of our Mana Lords, but I do think if I was expecting Eldrazi Tron and I had choice between an Electromancer and a Brawl, I'd probably just play the Electromancer. Against real Tron, it doesn't really matter. However, the green-black version is more popular nowadays, and it plays both Collective Brutality and Fatal Push. One of the main strengths of Baral's Chief of Compliance is he survives Collective Brutality. So, either way, if we had a choice, I'd play Baral here. But it looks like our opponent's away from the computer or something. Or he has a very important decision to make about what to do on my upkeep while tapped out. A useful play to make against Tron, if possible, is to hold up Remand, if we can find one through a Merchant Scroll or just draw one, to bounce his turn 3 play and give us a much greater chance of going off on turn 4 rather than trying to force it through on turn 3. Because through Baral's looting ability, between the Remand draw plus the loot, we go 2 cards deeper into our deck plus a draw stage. Between those 3 cards, we're more likely to draw action or extra mana or whatever we need to really go off on that 4th turn. Some of the tricky judgment calls in this deck occur when you have a Lord in place and you got a Manamorphose, a Ritual, and say a Cantrip. And deciding whether you want to commit much mana at that point to trying to go off or if you just hold off for a turn. Against Tron, the question is, can you still go off if they cast Karn on turn 3 and exile your Baral? If the answer is no, you want to force it through on turn 3, or at least dig for a Remand to keep yourself going for one more turn. On Reddit, I've seen some discussion about whether you should play Gift Stormed with Merchant Scroll or not bother and just keep the Thought Scours in. And I've played quite a bit with both lists, and I definitely prefer the Merchant Scroll version. The big thing is having a way to tutor for an Echoing Truth is extremely useful. Many decks, like Death Shadow Jund, are siding in Eidolons now. Affinity lists have Rule of Law. There's just lots of weird enchantments you can't really beat. And having 3 tutors for a way to bounce it and then force the win through has just been... It was extremely useful in Grand Prix Vancouver. I played against a lot of hate in sideboard games, and the Merchant Scrolls won me at least 4 to 5 games. Maybe more. But if you're trying to decide for yourself, I really recommend just playing both lists. Merchant Scrolls aren't very expensive, and neither are Thought Scours. Just play it both ways. Obviously, people are winning with both lists, so it's personal preference, but for what it's worth, as someone who plays this deck a lot, I think the Merchant Scrolls have a very good place in the deck. While I wait for our opponent to come back, I'm just going to go over the deck quickly so we can kind of see what I'm talking about. Yeah, so in many of these lists, these 3 Merchant Scrolls are basically, as well as Echoing Truth, are sided out for 3 Thought Scours and another Grape Shot or an Empty the Warrens or something. Most lists have settled on the double remands. And I'm not seeing as many people splashing white as initially occurred. It's up to you, but the problem we have is that there's a fair amount of Chalice in the format right now, especially through Eldrazi Tron. And if you're playing white to splash the Wear and Tear and they have a Chalice on 2, you just have no way of getting through. Meanwhile, Shattering Spree is a perfect answer because it gets through Chalice on 1, Chalice on 2, and is really good against Affinity. Making the extra red mana required to replicate is very rarely a problem. Well, still no opponent. As a general note on sideboarding, the remands they earn their keep in game 1. They slow down other combo decks, and when you're short in, if you don't have an Electromancer or a Brawl, Grape Shotting, you're remanding your Grape Shot to recast it on the same turn is a very valid way of winning the game. And one of the most common ways I beat Jund is to play a Baral or Electromancer in turn 3, holding a mana up, remanding the removal spell, then going for it the next turn. Similarly, against Tron, being able to slow them down by a turn by bouncing the Karn or something just gives you that extra turn you need to really combo off. This deck does win on turn 3, but unfortunately it doesn't consistently win on turn 3. I don't think any deck in Modern does, except for maybe Cheerios. So if you can protect yourself to make it to that 4th turn, you just have a much higher chance of winning the game. I think we auto-win after 10 minutes of inactivity. 12 of 4, last turn 11:56, so 2 more minutes. Going back to the deck list though, another problem here is we only have these 2 win cons. If they exile or Grape Shot, we really can't Grape Shot kill them, period. However, I've played this deck a lot, and the number of times my Grape Shot's been exiled are really very low. The bigger risk is if it's in the graveyard early and a Past in Flames is exiled, and then these are both in your graveyard, and you basically have to generate enough storms so that when you flash back Past in Flames, only casting Grape Shot once will be lethal. But on that note, our standard gifts package is Past in Flames, Ritual, Manamorphose, Desperate Ritual. This generates most mana. This is what we usually go for. Sometimes, however, I cut a Manamorphose or a Pyretic Ritual and side in a Grape Shot. Because if the deck's going to generate a ton of mana, being able to cast this for a low storm count, cast Past in Flames, recast my rituals, and cast it a second time, can kill your opponent even if you don't really have enough storm to go off normally. So by adding the grape shot to the gifts pile, you basically force your opponent into giving you the rituals, a ritual in hand. And a ritual in hand plus either another ritual or Past in Flames generates a lot more mana than having both rituals in your graveyard, which is typically the appropriate thing for our opponents to do. Okay, so Magical Online's messing up here. It's showing way too many copies of these rituals right now. Yeah. Okay. Well, that was an easy match. Wish there was more games to show.